National POW MIA Recognition Day has been commemorated since 1979. It's held on the third Friday of each September. America remembers our prisoners and missing and renews our commitment to the fullest possible accounting. Today, the National League of POW MIA Families offers our gratitude to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund for their support in hosting this first ever virtual National POW MIA Recognition Day event. We're also grateful to the returned POWs, POW MIA family members, veterans, and concerned citizens who answered our call for POW MIA bracelet stories. As you'll soon witness, their contributions are inspiring demonstrations of patriotism, dedication, and love. But first, some background. Today there are 1,586 Americans still unaccounted for from the Vietnam War. For more than 50 years, the National League of POW MIA Families has been dedicated to a threefold goal: the return of all live prisoners, the fullest possible accounting for the missing, and the repatriation of recoverable remains of those who died while serving our nation. Also, some history from Carol Bates Brown, one of the founders of the POW MIA bracelet movement.
Hi, I'm Carol Bates Brown. In 1970, another college student and I decided we wanted to wear some type of bracelet to remember the suffering and the mistreatment of American prisoners of war in Southeast Asia. We thought maybe a few other college kids would want to wear them too. Well, little did we ever believe, or would have believed, that within 3 years, nearly 5 million people were wearing those bracelets. They played a major role in the international campaign to draw public attention to the mistreatment of American prisoners in Southeast Asia.
My POWMIA story is obviously about my dad, Colonel Oscar Moderer, who was shot down over Laos on 2/15/66. My mother, unbeknownst to me, had many POWMIA bracelets made and given to friends of mine in junior high and high school. I just learned about this a few years ago and can't tell you how wonderful it is to hear from those who care about my dad and want to know what happened to him, and with me demand the fullest possible accounting. And I also want to thank those who continue to wear his bracelet.
Fred Bell, the managing director of the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California, has been wearing Tony Shine's bracelet for several years. Captain Shine was lost in Vietnam flying the A-7. In the background is the A-7 Corsair II, as you can see, is under restoration.
We have about 70 aircraft in inventory presently. We're doing a lot of jet restorations like this A-7A. As far as Tony goes, I think the big thing, what struck me about his story was, the war at that time was essentially over for the most part. We were in the process of pulling out, and yet Tony went out, strapped the airplane on, went out, and then just didn't come back. And nobody really has ever really figured out what happened to him. His airplane crashed, he was found. So whenever I'm not, when I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm not feeling motivated, I look at this because he inspires me to continue to go on and to continue to work towards our goals.
I'm Dr. Dave Thompson in the Vietnam hangar of the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California, with our POW-MIA bracelet display in the background. We received our first bracelet about 5.5 years ago and now have some 1,800 bracelets that have been donated to the museum. This is a permanent, ongoing display and we would be honored to include the bracelet of any person who would like to have their bracelet seen for many years to come. Don Barnett is with us today at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California, with a F-105 Thunder Chief in the background.
I'm the brother of Colonel Robert W. Barnett. He flew the F-105 out of Thailand in his 43rd mission. He was hit by a SAM missile. He is north of Hanoi, and so he ended up with 5.5 years of prison as a result. Around 1970, the bracelets began. Well, also, in Bob's case, we didn't know for over 2 years if he was dead or alive. I purchased my bracelet through Bob's wife, Anita. So I wore the bracelet for 5.5 years. I donated the bracelet to the Air Museum. My mother's oldest brother in World War I was listed as missing in action, and her mother then always thought he was going to come home. So our mother was going through that same stress that she may never see Bob again. I know while he was in prison, I was driving to work one day and I saw a billboard that said, "Let my brother go," and I broke into tears.
Cheryl Benoit is with us today at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California, with the OV-1 Mohawk in the background.
I wore the bracelet of Staff Sergeant D.AVE, and he was a crew member on one of these aircraft. Long ago, and close to 50 years I think we're coming up to, I purchased the bracelet and wore it during the Vietnam years in his honor, and unfortunately he did not return. During Vietnam, I did volunteer with the USO in Hollywood and Los Angeles, and it was at that point that the bracelets did come out, and I purchased them and took them to the USO, and many of us, the volunteers, wore those bracelets for many, many years. Some people were able to return those to the POWs when they returned. Unfortunately, David's did not, so mine is here at the Palm Springs Air Museum.
Jerry Ingalls is with us today in the Vietnam hangar at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California, with the F-4 Phantom in the background.
Right. My bracelet was Captain Dennis Chambers. He was shot down on the F-4 north of the DMZ. We were close friends. We were kind of like brothers from another mother, roommates at San Jose State. Both went through Air Force ROTC together, and pilot training, he was a couple of classes ahead of me, but both at Williams Air Force Base. We were both in country at the same time. I was stationed at Vung Tau and he was at Cam Bay. A week before he got shot down, I had spent an overnight in Cam Bay with him we did a little damage at the Officers Club, but so I wore this bracelet till he was repatriated in 1973. Well, I still have one bracelet, but another bracelet is on the POW bracelet wall here that has been constructed at the museum.
Gary Luters is with us today in the Vietnam hangar at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California, with the F-4 Phantom in the background.
I'm wearing a bracelet today for John Bush. John and I were in pilot training together in the 1964 to 65. After pilot training, he went to F-4s, and I went to KC-135, air refueling tankers. And in 1966, I was flying combat air refueling missions in Vietnam, and John was in Da Nang flying combat missions in the F-4. 1 month before he was shot down in June of 1966, I happened to be in Da Nang and looked him up. We had kind of kept in touch. So looked him up, and we had dinner together, and we talked about the war and how it was going, and then he got shot down a month later. My original bracelet is on display here at the museum.
Today, We are at the lovely home of Chris Mead here in Rancho Mirage, California.
In the late 60s and early 70s, I lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of Fort Bragg. And when I was there, I was a manager of a small branch bank. One of my work colleagues was a dear friend of Mrs. Raymond Schrump. And Major Schrump was captured and held as a prisoner of war for 5 years. When I met Mrs. Schrump, I just anguished for her. She didn't know when or if her husband would come home, and she's the one that told me about the bracelet program. So I sent for several, shared them with friends in Oregon, and I wore that bracelet on my left wrist. And I remember touching that bracelet all the time and praying for Raymond Schrump's safe return. And the day that he did get off that airplane, I remember jumping up and down for joy and crying and being so relieved. I read an article in the Desert Sun asking for bracelet donations, and I couldn't call DR.DAVE fast enough. So I've been very proud to be part of this program.
Barbara Wall is with us today in the Vietnam hangar at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California, with the F-4 Phantom in the background.
I got my bracelet probably in the 70s sometime. I had friends that were wearing them. I saw a lot of people with them on. And I noticed that there was something in the newspaper one day, and they had an address that you could send away for. So I did, got my bracelet. It was just very special because it was a way to remember to honor the MIAs and the POWs. It wasn't until some time later that I had learned that he had died in the aircraft that you see behind me and on a mission.
And where is your bracelet now?
It's right here in the Palm Springs Air Museum. They have a display, and I decided to give it to the display because I thought this way everybody would get a chance to see it. And so I thought, what better way, to have that bracelet shared for everybody.
David Mendel is with us today in the Vietnam hangar at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California, with the POW MIA bracelet display in the background.
It was back in the early 70s, 70 or 71. There was a couple of people that came into our yacht club and were showing us the bracelets and telling us about them, and I thought it was a wonderful idea. I'm former Navy as well, and I do support our troops. So my bracelet was Lieutenant Commander David Cooley, and he flew the F-111B in Vietnam. That's the plane he was in when it went down. I wore his bracelet for about 13 years after that. Joined the museum in 2015, and I met Dr. Thompson, and he told me about his program, and I donated my bracelet. And my wife had 2 bracelets. We donated them all to the museum, and they're sitting here in one of these 2 cases.
Hi, my name is Katie Matson. I wore a bracelet for Lieutenant James W. Herrick when I was in college at Brigham Young University. He was in a plane crash in 1969 and declared MIA. His remains have never been found, but I was able to send the bracelet to his niece in 2019. I bought a duplicate bracelet for display at the Palm Springs Air Museum.
Hi, my name is Judy Mosher Sylvester. Both of my brothers served in the Vietnam War, Ted for 8 years in the Marine Corps and Brad for 8 years in the Air Force. Thankfully, both returned safely home, but many did not. So in 1971, I ordered a POW MIA bracelet, received it with Lieutenant Commander Norman Eidsmoe's name on it. I wore that bracelet faithfully for many years, always wondering and praying. 3 years ago, I donated his bracelet to the Palm Springs Air Museum Bracelet Collection in Palm Springs, California. It was there that I learned that now Commander Norman Eidsmoe was a pilot whose plane was shot down over North Vietnam on January 26, 1968. His remains were recovered in 1999, and he lies at rest at Arlington National Cemetery.
My name is Jackie Carlson. I got my POW bracelet in the early 70s in Wisconsin. I wore it for many years after the war ended until it finally broke in half. I put it in my jewelry box and it traveled from Wisconsin to Arizona to California. A few years ago, I saw an article in our local newspaper that the Palm Springs Air Museum was starting an exhibit featuring POW bracelets and were looking for donations. I knew in that moment that my bracelet had found a home. This project means a lot to me because my father served in the Army. One of my uncles was MIA in Korea. Another uncle was on one of the ships that was bombed in Pearl Harbor. My brother served in the Navy. My prisoner of war's name was William Pearson III. Biff was his nickname. He went missing on April 13, 1969. I know that Biff had a son by the name of Todd who'd be in his 50s now. I want Todd to see this one day and know that his father was never forgotten. His story and his bracelet are now in the Palm Springs Air Museum.
Hi, my name is Deborah Morris, and I wear the bracelet of my uncle, Master Sergeant James Henry Calfee of Bowling, Texas. He was in the Air Force, and he was stationed at Lima Site 85 in Laos. The site was overrun, and 11 men have never been heard from again. James is one of those. In 2012, we found papers that we filed with awards index in the Air Force, and we had James's medal elevated to a Silver Star. James was to be retired after this mission. He was going to retire and do what he loved best, fishing. Just recently, his hometown newspaper ran an article about him again, and Lima Site 85. I will continue to wear his bracelet until we know the complete truth of this matter, until all are home.
Marissa Abrams.
And my name is Stephen Cowan. In the Army in 1963 to 69. I'm a Vietnam veteran.
So my father's service inspired me to, on my 8th grade field trip, to go on a little renegade escapade and purchase a POW bracelet. And I wound up purchasing the bracelet of Lieutenant Daniel Bora from Olney, Illinois, who was shot down over Vietnam in September of 1972. And I wore his bracelet for a little over a decade until his remains were repatriated in '96. And we donated all of that material to the Palm Springs Air Museum, including all of the memorabilia that I'd collected for decades around POW MIAs. So I'm very grateful to display Lieutenant Bora's bracelet in the Palm Springs Air Museum, and I wore that bracelet every day to remind us of the ultimate sacrifice that he made.
I wore the bracelet for Major Joseph Chestnut, who was shot down in October of 1970. I wore the bracelet all through the war and past the war, and continued to try to find out what happened to him. Eventually I did find out that he didn't make it home. I was very happy to donate my bracelet to the Palm Springs Air Museum bracelet display in his honor.
My name is Donna Graves. I'm from the Palos Hills, Illinois area. In 1967, my brother-in-law, Thomas Gaskin, was drafted in the U.S. Army to serve in Vietnam. I was 12 the day we took him to the airport, not fully realizing it would be 2 years before we saw him. He came home safe, but forever changed. In 1992, I had the honor of volunteering at a moving Vietnam Wall, where I purchased my first bracelet to honor Lieutenant Colonel Taryn Hicks, who disappeared in 1968. Very similar to the one I have in my hand here. I have since worn 5 bracelets, 2 which I've returned to family. The other 3 I donated to the Palm Springs Air Museum bracelet display. I was contacted by DR.DAVE Thompson. It took me a bit, but I sent them. I hope you take the time to go and see his museum and all the hard work he's done to honor these soldiers.
In June 1970, when Lieutenant John Ryder was shot down, I was an 18-year-old college freshman in St. Louis. Although I was against the war, I was never against the warriors. I ordered my bracelet about 2 years after Lieutenant Ryder went missing, and when I received it in the mail, I wondered if I would ever know the fate of this young man. He was older than I was, but still so young. After the war was over, my husband and I visited the Palm Springs Air Museum, and I decided that was a good place for my bracelet to live forever. Lieutenant Ryder's remains were never found. Rest in
Hello, my name is Susan Quaid Gabriel, and I live in central New Jersey. In my final year of high school, my graduating year, 1983, our class was having a fundraiser selling POW and MIA bracelets for Vietnam soldiers that were either missing in action or prisoners of war. I purchased a bracelet for a airman that lived in Wildwood, New Jersey. He was 26 years old when he went missing in North Vietnam. His name is Major Dyke A. Spillman. I wore my bracelet from 1983 until 2019 when I donated it to the Wall of Faces every Memorial Day and every Veterans Day. And I personally reflected and was happy to share his story with anyone who asked what my bracelet was and what it meant to me. So I am proud to have donated it to the Wall of Faces, and I feel that it's very important in a war that happened so long ago that we remember all of our fallen and lost.
Hi, my name is Terry Kravitz, and when I was about 15 years old, I was so moved by the Vietnam War and what was going on, and I wanted to do something to represent my feelings towards the servicemen and what they were doing and how they were fighting for us. And I heard about the bracelets and I said I must get one. And the person I had a bracelet for was Willie Stark. And I wore that bracelet every day. I prayed for him, I thought of him, I wondered how he was. In later years, I found out that he was MIA and he had died on the battlefield. But my thoughts about him remained, and for so many of the servicemen that fought for us and unfortunately didn't come back. My bracelet was sent to the Palm Springs Air Museum display, and it was an honor to wear it, and I was honored to carry the memory of Willie Stark with me for such a long time.
Hi, my name is Julie Gleim, and when I was 14 years old, I purchased a copper MIA POW bracelet through my junior high school in California. The man's name on my bracelet was Captain Richard Elzinga. It was my privilege to be able to communicate with his mom a couple of times as we exchanged letters. It was very special to me back then, and it still touches my heart today. Wearing my bracelet gave me a very strong feeling of being patriotic and somehow at 14 years old participating in what was going on in the world. Donating my bracelet to the Palm Springs Air Museum was a little difficult, as parting with it was not easy for me, but I felt like I was able to participate in something a little bit bigger by donating it, and it is my honor and my privilege to have it there on display with so many hundreds of others whose lives each bracelet has touched. Thank you so much. God bless.
I wore the MIA bracelet of Colonel Norman Eden. His plane disappeared over Laos in 1969. It was somewhat personal for me because I was a flight attendant for a charter airline called Flying Tigers, and for 7 years I flew troops to and from Vietnam. It's possible that Colonel Eden could have been on one of my flights. I gave my bracelet to the Palm Springs Air Museum for their display.
I'm Joanne Shirley, the Georgia State Coordinator for the National League of POW/MIA Families and former Chairman of the League's Board of Directors. This is a picture of my brother, Major Bobby Marvin Jones, MD, United States Air Force Flight Surgeon. Bobby has been missing in action since November the 28th, 1972. He was flying backseater in an F-4D flying from his base in Udon, Thailand into Da Nang. Shortly after we lost Bobby, we joined the League of Families and we got our POW/MIA bracelets with Bobby's name on them. I have worn this bracelet every day since then, and it reminds me of Bobby every day, and I pray for him many times a day. I have shared his bracelet with many family members and friends and greatly appreciate their support and have been very blessed by that. I pray daily that the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency can recover Bobby's remains and return them to us so that we may honor him for his service and his sacrifice.